you also have prioritization that the client provided, either directly or to the product owner, who reprioritized based on discussions they had with the client. So now the product owner and the client know what's most important to them. Remember, the goal is to deliver business value early, based on what's most important to the client. So you're able to forecast and plan for what you're going to build in the current sprint as well as the next 2 sprints. Now, if something changes, you're going to have another sprint planning meeting after the current sprint. And if you need to make any adjustments, you can do that. Let's say your team identified a defect from the previous sprint. You communicate that to the product owner. The product owner adds that to the product backlog. So it's not just requested functionality, it's a defect. But it's time that your team may need to spend working on it to fix it. So now you're going to have everybody in the sprint planning meeting, and the product owner or the development team is going to ask the customer, how important is this defect? It could be very important to them. It could be a showstopper. Or the client may say, you know what, we're not really going to touch on that functionality, so we'll rank it really low. At some point later on in the project, we can address it, that's fine. But for right now, let's add these additional functionality items. So the team selects as much of the product backlog it can handle in that sprint. Remember I was saying how important it is to have established velocity. Velocity is the amount of work that your team is able to complete. Finished work, not incomplete work, finished work. And you can only have established velocity by having done a number of sprints already. When you've already done a number of sprints, you already know what your velocity is, the capacity of your team, how much work you can produce per sprint. Understanding the product owner's wish list. This is clearly defined, prioritized backlog items. Not just the user stories, but the priority. How important they are. At this point, you're going to have the client there, you're going to have the product owner there, and you're going to have all of your development team members. They're going to take each user story that you're planning to implement in that sprint, and the development team is going to break that down into tasks. Now, what happens if your user story is too large?
It rolls over to another sprint.
Your team can't estimate it if it's too large. It has to be small enough to the point where your team can now deconstruct it into user stories, into tasks. And then your team can provide estimates for each of those tasks. Now, as they're doing that, the client is there in the room with you. So now the client understands why it's going to take the amount of time that it will take. So your developers are providing the estimates, they're assigning themselves tasks, and your client has visibility into that as well as your product owner. So if your client has any questions, why is that going to take 24 hours to do that? Your development team can answer that question. And maybe it's complexity that the product owner or the client didn't understand. It's stuff that the development team has to do behind the scenes. The outcome is agreed sprint goals, so there's a goal for each sprint. And remember, that should tie in with the overall vision for the product.
Could you call the goals KPIs? I'm trying to translate it.
So KPI, they're more key performance indicators.
Yeah.
They're more metrics to use to, indicate how successful you are. I would say that those are more metrics.
Okay.
Your goal is going to be, this is what we're going to include in this sprint. Now, it could be to enhance certain functionality. It doesn't have to be as specific, but it's definitely, saying this is the goal of.
Because my goals are always conversions, so for social media. So.
But that should also tie into the overall product vision.